像联合国最近有一个纽约总部的人权事务的主任，他辞职了，你知道为什么吗？他说，所有的这些媒体还有以及我们自己联合国内部的对于以色列的袒护已经到了不可令人接受的地步。也就是说，不仅仅是媒体，而且连联合国自己的这种人权事务部，他们都袒护以色列，所以他自己愤而就辞职。他说，联合国都没有本着他就是以世界和平的规章在办事情，连 BBC CNN 的记者也一样，他们的新闻送到像我们媒体的总部以后，竟然都会被拿掉，对以色列不利就拿掉，对以色列有利的就登，对巴勒斯坦不利的他们就登，对巴勒斯坦有益的他们就不登。所以在这种情况底下，大家可以看到世界上对于就说你看现在已经死亡了42000人的巴勒斯坦人了，但是完全没有得到什么，没有得到国际社会的尊重。
The model of the United Nations that had been successful, whose origins we can trace back to the ideas of President Wilson, who spoke of a society of peace without victory and was based on the cooperation of nation states, has been abandoned. It has been replaced by a model of supranational governance by international bureaucrats who intend to impose a certain way of life on the citizens of the world. What is being discussed this week here in New York at the Summit for the Future is nothing other than the deepening of that tragic course that this institution has adopted from a model that, in the words of the United Nations Secretary himself, demands the definition of a new social contract on a global scale, doubling down on the commitments of the 2030 Agenda. I want to be clear about the position of the Argentine agenda. The 2030 Agenda, although well-intentioned in its goals, is nothing more than a supranational socialist government program that aims to solve the problems of modernity with solutions that undermine the sovereignty of nation states and violate the right to life, liberty, and property of individuals. It is an agenda that aims to solve poverty, inequality, and discrimination with legislation that only deepens these issues, because the history of the world shows that the only way to guarantee prosperity is by limiting the power of the monarch, ensuring equality before the law, and defending the right to life, liberty, and property of individuals. It has been precisely the adoption of this agenda which responds to privileged interests, and the abandonment of the principles outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations that has distorted the role of this institution and set it on the wrong path. Thus, we have seen how an organization that was born to defend human rights has been one of the main drivers of the systematic violation of freedom, such as the global quarantines during the year 2020, which should be considered a crime against humanity. This long list of errors and contradictions has not been without consequence, as it has led to a loss of credibility for the United Nations among the citizens of the free world and has distorted its functions. That is why I want to issue a warning. We are facing an end of a cycle. Collectivism and the moral posturing of the UOC agenda have collided with reality and no longer have credible solutions to offer for the real problems of the world. In fact, they never did. If the 2030 Agenda has failed, as its own promoters acknowledge, the response should be to ask ourselves if it was not a poorly conceived program from the start, accept that reality, and change course. One cannot insist on persisting in error, doubling down on an agenda that has always failed. The same happens with ideas that come from the left. They design a model according to what they believe humans should do, and when individuals freely act otherwise, they have no better solution than to restrict, repress, and curtail their freedom. If the United Nations decides to return to the principles that gave it life and readapt the role for which it was conceived, count on the unwavering support of Argentina in the fight for freedom. Know also that Argentina will not support any policy that involves the restriction of individual freedoms, trade, or the violation of the natural rights of individuals, regardless of who promotes it or how much consensus that institution has. For this reason, we want to officially express our dissent regarding the Pact of the Future signed on Sunday and invite all the nations of the free world to join us not only in dissenting this pact, but also in creating a new agenda for this noble institution, the agenda of freedom,